Hello. So I heard some of you are thinking about taking Chinese as your foreign language.
Excellent choice.
Now, a lot of you have probably heard that Chinese is really hard, and I remember being in that exact same position before I started learning. So I'm here to show you some useful tips and tricks that will not only make Chinese easier for you, but it will also be more fun to learn. So let's get started. Tip number 1 is consume Chinese media. This can be songs on Spotify, TV shows on Netflix, anything like that. You're not going to understand what people are saying necessarily off the bat, but the important thing is you're developing your ear for Chinese phonetics, and eventually you'll start recognizing words. I actually have a Spotify playlist that I used to listen to on my way to class. It's kind of an R&B lo-fi type deal, and so if that interests you, check the link in the description. Tip number 2 is record yourself and listen back to double check your pronunciation. When you're just starting out, it's really hard for your brain to double check you're saying things correctly while just being able to get the words out. So by listening to yourself, you're able to give your pronunciation a nice check. Another great way to check your pronunciation is to use Google Translate. Just speak into the translator, and if the AI algorithm is able to pick up what you're saying, then your pronunciation is more than likely pretty spot on. This next tip is really helpful if you're someone like me and you always have a song stuck in your head. You can practice your Chinese pronunciation by breaking a sentence down slowly and to a beat. That way, not only will you be able to practice your pronunciation and make sure it's spot on, but the sentence will more likely than not end up stuck in your head. And so that's just a great way to reinforce the pronunciation and the grammar that you learned. It sounds silly, but it is super effective. I can't tell you how many times I was just going about my day like,
你有姐姐吗？你有姐姐吗？
So this next tip is for remembering characters. Now, the easiest way I found to remember them is to break them down into their individual components and then make either some sort of a visual image that ties all the components together or some sort of memorable saying or story.
So the best resource for this is MD Chinese Dictionary. They're great for stroke order, for character decomposition. You'll definitely want to bookmark them. So to take a look at 名字, which means name, it's a word you'll learn in the first lesson. It's really the first character that gives the essence of name to the word. So you'll probably recognize the two components from your 40 essential radicals. One is for evening and the other is for mouth. So how I remember it is there's someone, it's gotten dark out, he wants to get his friend's attention, so he can't necessarily wave his hands. He has to use his mouth to call out his friend's name. And boom, character retained.
Now, nothing beats writing characters down with a pen and some paper to practice, but that can be hard when you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have pen and paper available. So what you can do is write the characters in the air, like that. And you really want to take care and make sure you're not just like, being sloppy with it. You really want to write each stroke individually, but that's a great way to practice if you're essentially anywhere. At the end of the day, what's going to get those characters in your head is practice. Lots and lots of practice. So the next few tips are going to be how you can get the most out of Chinese class. Now, the number one most important thing I would say is be sure that you preview the material before you actually get to class. I know there were definitely a few times when I had some projects due and I didn't get to, see what we were going to be doing in class before I got there, and it's just not an enjoyable experience. You're essentially going to be scrambling just to keep up instead of having the opportunity to let the information really sink in and to be able to ask Lao Shi any questions that you might have. Now, it's true that for native English speakers, Chinese can definitely be hard, and I think it's important to keep that in perspective so that if you are at any point struggling, you really need to remember not to be too hard on yourself, that this is a challenging language to learn, and you're okay to make the occasional mistake as long as you learn from it. And there's definitely something to the challenge that makes learning Chinese so rewarding, I would say. And plus, it's kind of cool when people are like, oh, what language do you study? And you say, oh, Chinese. And they're like, whoa, I heard that was so hard. And you're like, yeah. It's the one and only. So the last thing to remember is class is a safe space for learning and trying, and also for making mistakes. So I know all of you are going to probably make a mistake at some point where inwardly you're just gonna cringe to yourself and be like, that's how I learned, that's how everyone in my class learned, and that's just part of the process. And so remembering that you're all going through the same thing in class, you're all in this together, you're all here to learn, is really good just in terms of, you know, keeping a positive attitude and not being afraid to go out of your comfort zone, because that's where the learning really does happen. So that's everything that I have. I hope that you guys learned some valuable tips, and best of luck on your Chinese journey.